It was supposed to be just another awards night in Los Angeles. Red carpets stretched across the venue, flashing cameras captured every smile, and political digs were wrapped neatly in humor. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until Karoline Levitt arrived. She wore a sleek dark green gown paired with her signature silver cross, walking in with quiet confidence. Beside her was her husband, Daniel Whitmore, a former Marine. He wasn't a celebrity, nor did he seek attention, yet his steady presence alone turned heads. Reporters whispered among themselves, wondering if he was security. No, he was her husband. A veteran ... inside the ballroom. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The lights dimmed, and Tom Cruise walked onto the stage as the host of the evening. He was charming and confident, his smile sharp with an edge that suggested trouble. He greeted the crowd, joking about senators, celebrities, and even flat earthers, drawing laughter. Then his attention turned to Karoline. He introduced her as America's favorite fire starter and joked that her husband looked like he'd stepped straight out of a Marine recruitment poster. The crowd laughed. Karoline's smile remained fixed, but Daniel's jaw tightened. Tom pushed further, joking that he mistook Daniel for a bodyguard until he saw the wedding ring, questioning how she ended up marrying him and tossing in a clumsy Jason Bourne reference. The laughter grew louder, but the atmosphere shifted. Karoline's face stayed calm, icy even. Daniel leaned toward her and quietly asked if she was okay. She nodded and replied that she was fine, but Tom wasn't. Moments later, Karoline placed her napkin neatly on the table, stood up, and walked backstage with Daniel. Tom, unaware of what he'd set in motion, continued hosting. Not long after, the room lights dimmed again. Tom paused, confused, as a single spotlight snapped on from stage left. Karoline emerged from the shadows. She hadn't been scheduled to speak, nor invited on stage, yet she walked forward calmly, confidence cutting through the room like silence itself. Even Tom seemed momentarily stunned. She took the second microphone and addressed the audience directly, explaining that since Tom had brought her into the conversation, she felt it was only fair to respond. She spoke about how easy it is to mock people who don't live in Hollywood's bubble, but made it clear that Tom hadn't just mocked her, he had mocked her husband, a man who spent 10 years in the Marines, a man who faced real danger, not cameras or scripted stunts. The room fell tense. Champagne glasses paused mid-air. Karoline continued, explaining that she didn't come from Hollywood, but from a world built on service, discipline, and respect, values she believed were not meant to be punchlines. She glanced briefly at Tom, whose smile had fully disappeared, and addressed his joke directly. If he was going to mock her husband, she suggested, he could at least be original. Comparing him to Jason Bourne might sound clever, but she added with certainty that Jason Bourne wouldn't last a second against him. The room reacted instantly. Cheers erupted, whistles followed, and several veterans stood in applause. Karoline allowed the moment to settle before delivering her final line. She stated plainly that she didn't need to be a movie star to command a stage, she only needed to tell the truth. With that, she turned and walked off, leaving the spotlight flickering behind her. Backstage, Daniel waited near the curtain. Quietly, he told her that what she had done was something special. Karoline smiled softly, knowing that this moment was only the beginning. His voice was steady as the shocked mic technician handed him a live microphone. Daniel turned briefly toward the audience, then calmly faced Tom. He spoke without anger, but every word carried weight. He told Tom he could joke all he wanted, but the moment he questioned Karoline's leadership, he had made it personal. She had earned her voice, Daniel said, while Tom only acted like he deserved his. One sentence was all it took. The reaction was instant. The entire front row gasped as Tom stood speechless. Daniel nodded once, handed the microphone back, and walked away. He didn't say another word, yet the message shook the room. By the time the awards show cut to commercial, social media was already erupting. Twitter, now X, lit up with trending hashtags and viral clips. Videos of Daniel's calm walk to the stage and his single line spread rapidly, reposted, slowed down, and remixed across platforms. People weren't reacting to anger. They were reacting to clarity and truth. A former Marine had spoken plainly, and people listened. News outlets picked it up within hours, praising his silent strength and composure. Even media figures who would normally defend Tom hesitated, because what had happened no longer looked like comedy. It looked like someone punching down, and a couple standing firm together. The next morning, Karoline's inbox overflowed with messages from supporters, veterans groups, students, and journalists. Many wrote that she didn't need to shout or fight dirty. She had simply brought integrity into a room full of ego, and truth had done the rest. Daniel, meanwhile, didn't check his phone at all. He stood in the kitchen, brewing coffee as if it were an ordinary morning. Karoline, still in her robe, smiled at him and mentioned that he'd practically broken the internet. Daniel smirked and replied that he'd only said the truth. She raised an eyebrow and told him that was exactly why it worked. Back in Los Angeles. Tom sat alone in his home office, replaying clips and reactions. His name wasn't trending because of a new film. It was trending because he'd been publicly humbled. He muttered that Daniel was dangerous, not because of his military past, but because of his influence. His team scrambled as a full-scale crisis unfolded overnight. Interns flagged damaging clips, while publicists scrambled to pitch interviews, to reshape the narrative. Some suggested calling it humor gone wrong, others a misunderstanding. Tom shut them all down. He refused to apologize. Even as he realized he was losing something far more valuable than screen time control. Meanwhile, in Washington, Karoline stood at the press podium. She didn't bring up the awards show, but the reporters did. When asked about the viral moment, she smiled calmly and said that what her husband spoke said more than anything she could add. He wasn't defending her, she explained. He was defending respect. That single sentence spread rapidly online, pulling in millions of views within hours. Soon after, the invitations began arriving. Morning shows and major networks all wanted Karoline and Daniel together. America had seen plenty of couples chase attention, but this one stood out because they were standing for each other. Before one interview aired, Karoline asked Daniel if he was sure about stepping into the spotlight. He shrugged and said he wasn't a fan of it, but if speaking up helped silence people like Tom, he was willing. When the interview broadcast, millions watched. Daniel explained that it had never been about defending honor, but about reminding people that not everyone with a microphone deserves to use it. Social media exploded again, labeling them a modern power couple defined by calm strength, belief, and backbone. Tom watched it all unfold from a hotel room, his expression tight. Finally, he picked up his phone and called his lawyer. Soon after, a plain manila envelope arrived. Karoline opened it at her desk, Daniel beside her with a cup of coffee in hand. Inside was a legal notice accusing them of damaging Tom's reputation and demanding a public apology. Karoline read it slowly, then smiled, not out of fear, but focus. Daniel shook his head and asked if Tom was really going that far. Karoline replied simply that he had chosen the wrong opponent. That night, Karoline stayed off television and avoided social media. Instead, she opened an encrypted file stored on a flash drive labeled Gibson 19. She plugged it into her laptop and entered a long password as Daniel watched silently. Inside were emails, screenshots, and a timeline tied to a 2019 military charity event in Los Angeles. Tom had backed out of a sponsorship at the last minute after making firm commitments to veterans. Karoline, then a junior congressional aide, had witnessed it and documented everything quietly. It hadn't been her fight back then. Now, she knew it wasn't about revenge. It was about a pattern mockery, dismissal of service, and hiding behind image. By morning, she was ready. Her team drafted a short but blistering statement. It acknowledged Tom Cruise's legal threat and made one thing clear. She was not intimidated. As someone who documents truth for a living, Karoline stated that celebrity lawsuits didn't frighten her. What did interest her was releasing full records of Tom Cruise's behavior toward military communities. If he wanted a public discussion, she added, she would be happy to schedule one in court or on camera. The internet erupted instantly. Conservative circles celebrated, moderates leaned in, and even liberal-leaning veterans began sharing personal experiences. Some confirmed they were present in 2019 and insisted Karoline wasn't lying. They described how Cruise had ghosted their charity event at the last minute, leaving them embarrassed and abandoned. Tom, meanwhile, sat in a crisis room, gripping a phone in one hand while his PR manager spoke urgently into his ear. He barked a single question: what exactly does she have? No one answered, because no one knew how far Karoline Leavitt was willing to go. That night, the Fox News studio appeared darker than usual. Spotlights focused on a single chair at center stage. A silver microphone waited in front of Karoline, a single sheet of glossy paper beneath her hand. Beside it lay a flash drive marked simply in black ink. Gibson 19. Host Tucker Green introduced her with barely restrained anticipation, explaining she was there not for commentary, but to respond to a lawsuit threat from actor Tom Cruise. The camera cut to Karoline. There was no smile, no theatrics, only calm clarity. She explained that she had been threatened legally by a man who mocked her husband's service, and then couldn't handle the public response. She named Tom Cruise directly. The room fell silent. Drawing on her experience in Washington, she said, "The people who hide behind power rarely expect to be confronted by truth." She then slid the flash drive forward and explained that it contained emails, memos, and direct communications from 2019 documenting Cruise's sudden withdrawal from a veterans charity event. That decision left over 100 service members without the funding and appearance he had promised. It wasn't a scheduling conflict, she said. It was a choice, and one he never apologized for. Even the host appeared stunned. Karoline turned toward the camera, addressing millions watching. She acknowledged that Tom had accused her of harming his reputation, but emphasized that what she held wasn't rumor or opinion. It was his own words. If the matter went to court, she said she would bring everything. If he wanted the lawsuit dropped, she was willing to consider one condition: a public apology to the veterans he had abandoned. Online reaction ignited like a second explosion. Hashtag surged again. Veterans shared photographs from the 2019 event: half-empty chairs, confused families, long waits that led nowhere. Many wrote emotional posts about promises made and broken. Major networks could no longer ignore the story. Tom remained silent. His lawyer refused interviews. His publicist declined comment. His social media went completely dark. Watching from home, Daniel leaned toward Karoline and wondered aloud if Tom would say anything at all. She shook her head and said he had already said enough in paper. The shockwave spread beyond politics and deep into Hollywood. Studio insiders leaked internal memos confirming that Cruise's cancellation had nothing to do with scheduling, but instead stemmed from branding concerns tied to the charity's conservative image. One memo bluntly described it as too rural and too red. Headlines shifted from gossip to accountability. Then came the unexpected moment. Keanu Reeves, known for staying quiet, broke his silence. He posted that he had been invited to the same veterans event in 2019 and that he attended. Tom Cruise did not. He said he had seen the disappointment on those faces and confirmed that Karoline Leavitt had spoken the truth. Veterans, he added, deserved better than being forgotten for optics. The statement went viral within hours, shocking Hollywood reporters and breaking an unspoken code among celebrities. Others followed, some anonymously, admitting that Cruise had a history of skipping events that didn't benefit his image. Asterisk's opinion shifted fast. Commentators across political lines agreed that this was no longer about ideology. It was about conduct and character. Karoline remained silent through it all. She didn't celebrate or amplify the attention. When asked about Keanu's statement, she simply said it took courage and that she respected it deeply. Behind the scenes, Tom's team scrambled for a counter-narrative. Tom himself shut it down, saying he wanted the story to disappear. But it was already too late. Asterisk, even comedians who once supported him joked carefully now, noting that Cruise had challenged a Marine's wife and lost to a flash drive. Daniel watched quietly from the kitchen and smiled faintly. When he asked Karoline if she ever expected Keanu Reeves to step in, she smirked and replied that she had hoped for Clint Eastwood, but she would take it. Asterisk, and then, quietly, the counterattack began.